Hello and welcome back to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Sean Hammond, Shaw Local Bears beat reporter. He's Michael Dwojak, Shaw Local Enterprise reporter. We are back for another episode of the Bears Insider Podcast, and the Bears once again were destroyed, Michael. It was pretty ugly on Sunday against the Lions. We both thought that this was an opportunity to play the game a little bit tighter. That did not materialize. They were down 20 points before they were even on the scoreboard.
Yeah, doesn't that say a lot, about where this team is at this point? I mean, obviously, I know, guys are playing for contracts and guys are trying to show off and maybe impress a potential head coach across the sidelines or whatever. But you didn't really get much of that, right? You got some points in some garbage time when the Lions were ahead by a lot, and yeah, I mean, you just didn't see much out of this team, and we haven't seen much out of this team ever since Eberflus was fired. Maybe he was bringing them together. I don't know how you want to correlate that and like what's been happening over the past 3 weeks, but yeah, just not the performance I thought that we would get. I didn't think that they would win, but I definitely thought that there would be a better chance of winning as opposed to what happened on Sunday.
That was having done this for a number of years now, that was the quickest I've ever seen the locker room just empty out. Like those guys were out of there. Like
Yeah.
nobody lingered. I mean, they really didn't have a whole lot to say. You kind of alluded to it. Like Keenan Allen was talking about playing for the name on the back of his jersey, and essentially saying he's playing for free agency. You know, he's auditioning for the 32 teams across the league as his contract expires here. And I on some level, I understand. Like, I don't know what else there is to say at this point. If you are those guys, especially on the defensive end, where they're just getting destroyed. I mean, the Lions scored on the first 5 possessions yesterday, and the Bears could not stop them. There's not a whole lot to say anymore, and it sucks. It kind of feels like these guys are, not to say that they're going through the motions, because they do care. Like they obviously want to perform well and play well, at least if nothing else for themselves and for their futures. But obviously this team is over this season.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard because you're like, well, you're eliminated from the playoffs. You work all off season. You work all like this isn't just like they like get to camp in like August or they start the season, whatever. This is like mini camp, and this is like OTAs. Like this is pretty much you get like January, February off. Obviously a little bit March, but then rookies coming in April, and then May you're just kind of getting into the swing of things. So I can get that. Like it's emotional, it's mentally draining, especially the way the Bears have kind of gone through this season, going through a 9-game losing streak. But at the other part of the day, you're just kind of like, well, like, okay, but you want to see some fight or something like that, and then going 3 and out offensively to start the game, and then fumbling the ball away on your next 2 possessions. I mean, we give the defense a hard time for how it hasn't really performed ever since Eberflus has played. But on the flip side, I mean, this offense has continuously not held up as part of the bargain at the beginning of games, and then they just put up points when it's like a 3 or 2 score game.
You can only ask a defense to carry the load for so long, to bend, don't break for so long. And we kind of saw that. We kind of felt that with that 49ers game. Like in the first Lions game, like they did hold the Lions to 16 points when it could have been really ugly in that first half.
Right.
And then they fired Flus, and it's like the wheels came off, and there was no more bend, don't break. Like there was nothing left. They had nothing left to give. And it doesn't help when the offense isn't scoring points in the first half like it wasn't the previous 3 games. They did finally score in the first half a couple of times, but it wasn't exactly enough to really keep it interesting.
No, and like I feel like at the beginning of the season, like this has been a season-long problem, right? Like this isn't new by any means, but like I feel like at the beginning of the season, you hear defensive players say, "Oh, like we're happy, we're like happy to do our part or whatever. Like they've got our backs, we've got their backs." When asking about the slow offense, and I feel like I haven't been inside the locker room in a little bit, but I don't feel like those are the answers you're hearing anymore. I feel like you're pretty much just hearing like we're taking care of what we need to take care of, or like we got burned on this player. it's unacceptable what happened or whatever. But you're not seeing much of that, quotes that you saw at the beginning of the year where you're kind of like, well, we've got each other's, like Caleb's developing, like what, like we've got each other's back. Where now it's just kind of like, I'm not saying that they don't have each other's back, but it just feels like it's kind of like everyone's kind of, on their own and just trying to figure things out and trying to figure out what the heck has happened here over the past 9 games.
Neither side of the ball is playing well, and you can't really hang your hat on anything when neither side of the ball is playing well. I mean, you and I were talking about it yesterday during the game. Like, what are the positives from this? And it's like there's nothing. There's hardly anything. There's Torrey Taylor is doing all right. There's there's not much to point to that gives you any excitement. I mean, I thought Caleb played all right, considering. You do wonder, like, how much of these last couple of games he's put up some good yardage. How much of that is okay? The defense is up by 2 scores. They're just playing prevent. They're just trying not to give up the big play, and they're okay with giving up the underneath stuff. I think some of that is a fair thing to question and to be concerned about. On the other hand, I mean, you can still turn the ball over no matter what the defense is playing, and he hasn't done that for the most part. I know there was the fumbled exchange with Rome early in that game, but he's not throwing interceptions. I thought Keenan Allen played really well in that second half, but it's just hard to really point to those things with any seriousness and say, okay, that's a positive from this game.
Yeah, it is interesting because, like, you've seen the stat, like he hasn't thrown an interception during this 9-game losing streak, and you feel impressed by it, right? Like, you're just kind of like, whoa, that's crazy. Like how is this team not lose or not winning because of that? But it's also because I feel like part of it has kind of been he's very protective of it. He holds on to the ball a little bit. He didn't do that as much yesterday against the Lions. I feel like he did a good job of scrambling and finding some open receivers down the field. But it is interesting because there's impressive stats. He continues to climb the Bears, season passing yardage and all that kind of stuff. But you're also kind of like, well, okay, but they're not winning, right? And it's kind of weird because you're just kind of like, well, eventually you want to win because of your quarterback. And he put us like, it's also hard because, like, they were in spots to win because of him, right? Like, they were in a spot to win against the Commanders because of him. They were in a spot to win against, the Packers and the Lions and the Vikings too the first time around, and they didn't win. So it's just kind of like, well, you're not winning, but you also are, trying to figure out like why you're not winning and like why you can't get over the hump. And it's interesting because I feel like for the most part, everyone is happy with Caleb. You want to see him continue to grow. He's shown flashes, but it is interesting the conversation of like, what does it all really mean? All these yards, all this, records when your team is losing 9 straight.
Yeah, it does in some ways. The season, the recent season, this reminds me of is sort of like Joe Burrow's rookie year, where that Bengals team was terrible, but you could see it. You could see that Joe Burrow was going to be able to play in the league. And not to say that Caleb is going to be Joe Burrow. They're very different players. But I feel like there's enough flashes that we've seen from Caleb over the course of this season. I mean, he's played every single game. He's protected the ball well. He's made some really nice throws. I do feel like you can see it. And yeah, you're right. Like, he is this is the 6th highest passing yard season in Bears history from Caleb Williams right now. There's 4 Jay Cutler seasons ahead of him. And Eric Kramer has the single season record just under 3,900 yards, I believe, from 1995. So yeah, there's something there. I feel like if nothing else, that's what you're going to take away from this season. If you're a Bears fan, you've got a promising prospect at that quarterback spot, and I know that everybody knows this already, but they just need to build around him.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? Like, you see, if you have you look across the sideline and you look at, like, if you have good offensive line, you have some playmakers, you have a reliable running back, obviously a talented running back, and a good play caller. You all respect to Jared Goff, but like, I think Jared Goff is managing the situation, right? I think Jared Goff is doing a good job of running Ben Johnson's offense. He's making plays where he needs to. He doesn't turn the ball over, and that's why he's found success in Detroit right after leaving the Rams. And that feels like a way where, I think Caleb is, you would probably say, is more talented than Jared Goff if you're just looking at, that type of stuff. But you can see like what happens if you just surround your guy with, ways to succeed other than just stacking him with like 3 reliable, good wide receivers. You can have a really good offense and set your quarterback up for success. And, other than looking at Ben Johnson across the sidelines and being like, he'll look good in like Bears, navy and orange, I think Ryan Poles needs to look at other stuff that the Lions did to kind of set them up for, a historic season that they're having.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, you were over in the Lions locker room yesterday. What was it? First of all, we've covered 9 consecutive losses here in Chicago. What was it like to be in the winning locker room? That must have been a different vibe.
It was tight. It was definitely tighter than the Bears locker room. But we were a little bit delayed in getting in because the team was watching on their phones the end of the Commanders Eagles game, and that obviously had a big factor in their game as well. But so you hear screaming and that kind of stuff after they got the result that they wanted. But it was a good locker room. They won a franchise record 13th straight win. You just see the cohesiveness of that they have, and that obviously comes down to Dan Campbell. Obviously, he's a really good head coach that I know a few years ago everyone was making fun of, but now look at him and where the Lions are. But it's just a fun locker room, right? And like obviously the emphasis for why I went there was to figure out, what makes Ben Johnson so great. And you saw that with the fake fumble play, the stumble bum, like they called it. I think if you look at it and you look through the records, I think it was inspired by Jordan Love and what he was able to do against the Bears and how that played out. But just hearing what the players had to say after the win about even that play, and you don't even have to like spend like a few seconds. Like you can ask them about the play and they're going straight to talking about how talented Ben Johnson is. Like that wasn't even the question that would come up or anything like that. It pretty much was, how do you come up with the play to have your quarterback pretend to fumble the ball?
Yeah.
And they're pretty much just like, we have trust in our offensive staff that they know what, like they're doing the research, they're detail oriented, they're looking at the defensive tendencies and like what they're doing. And they trust that Ben Johnson and that offensive staff is going to set them up for success. And it did, right? Like to go to a play where you have Jared Goff like stumbling, pretending to fumble the ball. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, falling to the ground, and you got the offensive line yelling fumble. And then you're selling the play, and like you have to have a full buy-in to that. And that's what you saw. And that's why it worked to perfection, right? Like you have an offensive mind that is obviously talented and seeing a lot of great things, but you also have a lot of players who are bought into it. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can take from Ben Johnson, where he's obviously a very talented, gifted offensive play caller who knows what he's doing and obviously is going to be the top candidate in this upcoming head coaching search. But you also see that buy-in that the players have. It's like they have full belief in him and that he's trying to put them in the best position to win a game and win a championship.
Yeah, anybody who played football or who's been to high school football games, like anytime the ball is on the ground, that whole sideline is yelling ball. And it sounds like that's what the Lions did with that play with the fake stumble from Jared Goff. The whole sideline is yelling that there's a fumble. That's going to catch the Bears' attention out there, whether they'll say it afterwards or not. I asked Kyler Gordon about that play. He said he wasn't fooled on it. I don't know. You watch the replay, like you see him running towards the backfield, maybe for a step or two, and then realizing that the ball's not on the ground and sort of backtracking. You can't, from the TV copy, you can't really see what's going on the back end, but I imagine that he was not the only one doing that. That is super creative. Like if you like who goes out there and watches Jordan Love literally fumble the snap a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, whenever that game was, and recover and just toss up a touchdown. Who watches that and says, let's do that? Like let's intentionally do that, more or less. These guys are really watching everything. And I think that, with Ben Johnson, like that's just a a creative thing. We see him trying different things. We saw that a couple of weeks ago in Detroit when the play didn't really work when Penei Sewell was going to throw a pass, but
Right.
It wasn't that far from working.
No, it wasn't. And that's the thing, right? Like I think that's why there's that belief in him and that kind of stuff, because he and his staff are watching so much tape, right? Like they're looking at all the things that all these defenses are doing, and they see a fluke play that works against the Bears by the Packers, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask Jared Goff first if he can fumble the ball and then pick it up." And then when Goff says no, like, I don't know if I'm that comfortable in doing that, he's like, "All right, we'll have you stumble instead." Like, that's an insane thing. But like, again, like I said, like these players believe in him and they think that, that they can succeed because of him. And like, it's like Rick says in our comments, like coaching matters. And I think that's the biggest thing you saw in this whole Bears season, right? Like coaching matters, whether it's late game decision making, whether it's going for a challenge, whether it's looking at your, opponent's tendencies. You don't, like the Commanders' Hail Mary play, you don't say that the 13-yard play before the Hail Mary play doesn't matter, right? Like you understand as a coach that these types of things matter and you own up for it and you are accountable for it. And that's what you see from these successful teams. And, I mean, it wasn't just even the stumble bum, like the play that they called it. Like you just see how well the offense works. The use of like 7 different, targets in the game, like using your tight end, like setting up your quarterback and your running back for success. Like it helps to have an offensive line that pushes 5 yards down the field before Gibbs needs to worry about being hit. Like that is obviously a luxury, but there's also the coaching part that matters. And it's good with the Lions right now. And I don't know how you're a Bears fan after watching the game and you're not like, I want Ben Johnson #1 on my list.
I mean, yeah, there is it's always a concern when you're like, okay, this guy has so many weapons. Like, could you put another offensive coordinator in there and he'd score points? Yeah, of course. Sure. It's kind of remarkable to look back on that Stafford Goff trade. They got the Lions got Goff, 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick. They wound up trading down a couple of times. And so in total, I mean, that trade alone got them Jared Goff. It got them Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams, Josh Pascal, the edge rusher on the other side, and a couple other guys on top of that. Like that is a pretty remarkable way to build your team. I mean, it's when you say it, it's not rocket science. Yeah, trade your quarterback and get a bunch of picks in return. But like they've hit on a lot of those picks. I mean, those Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, those are all key parts of your offense. Those are all really important weapons. I mean, Gibbs with Montgomery out, Gibbs is going to be the guy down the stretch here, and he's shown that he can handle that. This is Rick points out that the Rams got a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that it was a bad trade for the Rams. I'm just saying that obviously it really helped the Lions build this team that they have right now, and who knows, they might wind up with a Super Bowl at the end of this season. I really do think that's a trade that we're going to be talking about for a long, long time.
And if you like want to make like, it's an apples and oranges comparison, it's not a like right comparison, but if you want to look at like if you want to draw an equivalent between like the Bears and the Panthers trade, obviously for the #1 pick.
Yeah.
Like obviously you got Caleb Williams, but look at the other picks that he's gotten so far. And then obviously it's much earlier in the process than it is for the Lions, right? Like this happened a few years ago. So like it's much easier for us to say that trade, you see the benefits of it. But Darnell Wright, after 2 years, you're still trying to figure out, what you have there. He's talented and that kind of stuff, but are you as impressed as you would have been with having Jalen Carter, right? You've got Tyreek Stevenson, who continuously gets into fights with Jamison Williams and obviously got burned pretty bad yesterday. You got a punter and that kind of stuff. And who else? Is that everyone that? And then obviously they still got the 2nd-round pick next year, but yeah, you look at what the Bears got in their draft, in their trade, and I don't know if you feel as confident at this point as the Lions do with what they've been able to do. Again, hindsight, 2 years, probably difference between the trades and that kind of stuff. But if you're a Bears fan, you want to see some of those picks click, and I don't know if you're seeing that right now, a couple years into it.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was thinking about this morning. And I headed it over to tankathon.com, who does a really cool, where everybody is in the draft order that updates every week. That Panthers pick, man, the Bears and Panthers are picking back to back in the second round right now. Like we've been kind of hinting at it for a couple of weeks now. Like I think there's a legitimate chance that the Panthers pick is going to be lower down the order than the Bears own second round pick.
Imagine if you said that at the beginning of the season. Like, imagine if you said that the Bears, even if it's the same record or they're like a game separate, where like the Panthers are maybe a game worse, or if they're a game better, that you're like, oh God. But just imagine if you said that before the season and just where this team is at this point.
That's why it's so hard to, especially when the trade deadline in the NFL is relatively early. I know they moved it back a week this year, but it's essentially, just halfway through the season. And it's hard to predict where some of these picks are going to wind up. That's what happened with the Chase Claypool thing. Like at the time, the Bears were 3-5, I think. Like they weren't the worst team in the league. And then we all know how that turned out. That wound up being the 30. What was it? Was that the year?
33rd.
Was it 33rd? Yeah, the 33rd overall pick. Last year was the year that the Dolphins did not have a first round pick, so the order was a little off. It's it's a tough time to be a Bears fan. You guys know that. Rick, if you're joining us here on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. We would really appreciate that. Let me see.
Where's the thumb?
Where's my little thumb at? Am I there it is.
There it is.
We would really appreciate that. If you're listening after the fact on Apple or Spotify, keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. You can join us. You can see our lovely faces and talk to us live here in the comments. I'm going to hit a comment here from Rick that says, if we end up on an 11-game losing streak, would that change Warren's mind on keeping Poles? I personally don't think so. Now, I think you can make the argument that maybe it should. I think you could definitely make that argument. I think I've kind of been saying this the last couple of weeks, like this is going to be Poles' build, I think, for the next couple of years. I do think that he drafted this quarterback. I think they're going to let him see it out, at least for one or two more seasons, see what he can build around Caleb Williams. Now, I don't know. Kevin Warren could be a little bit of a wild card. He's had plenty of time to think about this. He's a guy who we've seen multiple examples now of he likes to sleep on it. He likes to take 24, 48 hours. He's going to have 5 weeks of Ryan Poles minus Matt Eberflus. Maybe that does change his mind. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted on the whole thing, right? Because you're just kind of like, I feel like you don't get rid of a general manager, 3 or 4 years into it, especially when you like 1 or 2 of those years are tear down years, right? Like, I feel like something
his first draft. Those guys are still on their rookie contracts. To me, that's but you gotta let them come through.
And it's kind of like you feel like there has to be like really bad circumstances in order to get rid of your coach.
Yeah.
But then when you kind of look at the fact of the matter, the Bears had their worst, losing streak under Poles the first time, and now they have the second longest losing streak. Like both the Bears' top 2 losing streaks have come
ever
in the 100+ year history of the Bears have come under Ryan Poles' leadership. And again, that's with the context of the first year being a full teardown year. That team was not meant to win. That was just signing guys to minimum contracts, trading guys away, trying to get draft picks. But this year's team was supposed to win. And I think that's the biggest thing with me, where I'm just kind of like, I am leaning toward your side of the conversation, where you're like, you let them see it through. You let them have a second coach. You let them figure things out. But you kind of just look at the whole thing and you're just kind of like, well, Caleb Williams is great. And there are some other nice pieces. You traded for Montez Sweat. How hard is it to trade for a really talented pass rusher? Like you didn't find him or anything like that. The Commanders are just trying to dump salary, and you took a talented player and gave him a nice contract. Other than that, like I can't think of like too many other home run hits that he's had where I'm just kind of like, well, it's been great so far. All I continuously think of is Claypool and Nate Davis and like Velus Jones Jr. and none of his like first draft class really making a difference for this team. Like I agree with you. Other than there's the wild card of Kevin Warren being like, maybe I just want my own guy. This isn't going well. I have a good excuse to put in my own guy and have my own situation. But I'm leaning like I'm probably like a 52-48 lean toward Poles staying, but I don't
That's
feel
pretty close though.
I don't feel entirely confident in it because other than Caleb, I don't really like the construction of this team at this point.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty close. I'd say I'm probably more 75-25.
Okay.
You could say DJ Moore is maybe a positive. I know that's the same trade we're talking about with that wound up getting them Caleb Williams. But I mean, you're kind of right though. Like there's starting to be a lot of negatives that are outweighing the positives when you look at just the build of this team. It's tough. Like he took over a 6-win football team and he's gone. They've done all of this. They've torn it down and done all this, and they've built a 4-win football team. It's like it's not where you want it to be. And it was Ryan Poles himself on Hard Knocks who was saying it's time to win. And clearly that hasn't been the case. I think this coaching search is going to be very interesting with the dynamic between Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, assuming that Poles is going to be still here.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you bring up DJ Moore, where obviously, you think he's he's obviously a very talented player, but I feel like he would tell you he's not having the season that he wants. Like he's having probably his worst season, and this is a guy who's been able to put like really good numbers with like what quarterbacks? Like his quarterbacks in Carolina were not great, and for everyone who always gave Justin Fields a hard time, he still caught a lot of passes. And then I know obviously with DJ Moore, he was pretty much the only target, so
yeah,
he didn't really have to share snaps as much as he does with Roman Keenan and Cole. If Cole's still on the team, he scored a touchdown.
He scored a touchdown yesterday.
But even DJ, you're kind of like, at the time we were like, whoa, the Bears got to steal. Like he's worth that much more money. But then after the season, I feel like we're kind of like, well, did they? Like maybe they got him like at the right price. Like maybe DJ is like throw a screen guy. And, it's hard because how many deep passes are you able to get going with this offensive line, right? It's really hard to evaluate everyone when the product on the field and like the parts just don't match.
I can't think. I watched last season with Justin and DJ and what he was doing in some of those games, that Washington game. And I look at how they're using him the last couple of weeks, and I'm just like, it can't be that hard to get this guy the ball down the field a little bit.
No.
It's kind of, I'm okay with running some different stuff, some screen passes, put him in the backfield. Sure, do that kind of stuff once in a while, but right now that's the only way they're getting him the ball, and that's a problem. I mean, he's supposed to be your top wide receiver. That is a major problem.
Well, they're kind of treating him like a running back, aren't they? Like they're either like handing him off the ball or they're like throwing a screen to him off to the side and just like setting up blockers. And like, sure, it's worked a couple times, but like that touchdown pass that Caleb had to Keenan Allen for 45 yards down the sideline, we don't see that with DJ, right?
No,
like
we
don't see those types of plays. We see like Rome scrambling down the middle and Caleb's able to find him for some reason. And I don't know. Like I think there was that one shot where Caleb overthrew him and it went like the ball bounced into the end zone and DJ was
way
like,
overthrew him.
Whatever. Yeah. But that's really the only play that I can think of like a long play to DJ that's been designed that way. And obviously I'm sure there have been that we don't pay attention to. Like we don't keep a tracker on every single wide receiver on every single play, but it just doesn't feel like there hasn't been that home run attempt with DJ at all this season.
I wanted to look up the depth of target, particularly like, first half of the season versus second half. I should go back and dig that up. There's another comment here. Did Tevin and Braxton play their last game as a Bear? I don't think Braxton did, although obviously the injury yesterday was scary and concerning. That could, if it is, I don't know what it is. If it is like a broken leg or something serious like that, that's probably going to put him in doubt for training camp in July, at least at the start. And that sucks. Now, I don't think that while I do think he's going to be a member of the team moving forward, I don't necessarily think he's going to be the starter. They might still draft a left tackle, sign a left tackle. As for Tevin, I don't know, man. The injuries have just been too many over the years, and I have a hard time seeing them wanting to give him. Uh, Not that it would take a ton of money. Like I think you could get him at a decent price, considering like the market. He's not going to be the highest paid guard in the league or anything like that. But I don't know. The injuries would really scare me away a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't give Tevin a contract. I like it's just you can find someone else who doesn't have the injury past, and it stinks, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like he's shown potential, but like from day one, like I feel like he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. Like it's just been his. It's tough because it stinks because they're like he's a talented player. Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like he's a relative, like he's a good leader in that room, right? But it just hasn't worked. And for Braxton Jones, yeah, that stunk. It's never good when the card comes out. It's a
No.
tough situation, and you got 2 weeks left in the season. One of those games being on Thursday, you're kind of like, well, maybe we just won't see him for the rest of the year. Which moves me on to my other topic
Mm-hmm.
and I know we got to move on to the Seahawks game. I don't know how much we need to preview. I don't know. It's just whatever. But um, can we talk about the Bears' decision with Kieran Amagaji before the game to make
Yeah.
him
You know what?
inactive?
You're right.
And I wasn't in the locker room with you guys because I was with the Lions. Did anyone explain anything about that to me? Because it still is baffling that we saw Jones and we saw Tevin get injured. You would think that's like ripe opportunity for your third round pick to get an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity against a depleted Lions, defensive line at home. I know the home crowd was probably 50-50 Lions fans, but whatever. Um, what are we doing? I mean, I don't understand that decision at all, unless it's like a thing where Kieran's like pouting, and I'm not saying that he is, but like if it's that sort of situation, then I'm like, all right, you can reward that by having him play, but I don't get that decision if he was perfectly healthy and like there were no off the field issues.
According to the injury report, he was perfectly healthy. He was the starter ahead of Larry Borum on Monday. He was behind Braxton and Larry come Sunday and was inactive. We did not get an explanation from Thomas Brown. Um, nobody asked him that, and unfortunately, the way it is after these games is the coach is talking at the same time the locker room is open. So I stayed in the locker room yesterday because we had you over in the Detroit locker room. I wanted to make sure I got some player perspective. So I was not actually in the room when Thomas was speaking, but according to the transcript, that was never asked. So that's something that we'll probably have to follow up on today on Monday, because it is a good question. Like, how do you go from the starting left tackle to behind? He basically got demoted for that performance when I said this on the show last week, and like it's just insane to me that you put him in that position with no practice with the starters. He found out the day before. It's completely mishandled. They completely mishandled that. They should have started Larry Borum in that Vikings game. They put Karan in a terrible position, just a terrible position. Like whether he's, you might think that he could be something down the line, and sure, I'm okay with a youth movement. I'm okay with playing your young guys at the end of a lost season, but my gosh, let him practice with the starters before you do that.
Yeah, and like I see in the comments both CJ and Rick kind of talking about like him not playing well and maybe he's more of a guard. All right, put him in and have the experience. Like he has experience at both positions. Like both your guard and your left tackle got injured in the game.
Yeah.
You have a perfect opportunity to get him in there and get him some reps and get him some opportunities. Like I don't. I get the frustration with Kieran. I get it that it was not good. He didn't protect Caleb against the Vikings, but I think there needs to be the other side of the context where like you're putting a third round pick who played in the All Ivy League against one of the top pass rushers and one of the top defensive minds in the league. Like I don't think that there's that context being put into
Yeah.
this argument where it's like you're putting a guy like in a position to fail. Like how many people feel like the Bears put Caleb in a position to fail with a bad
Mm-hmm.
offensive line. You're putting the offensive lineman in a bad position to fail in his first start against one of the top pass rushing defenses in the league.
Yeah. CJ says him being inactive suggests he's not ready. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like I am okay with him being inactive yesterday. he should not have been the starter on Monday in Minnesota. They should have gone with Larry Borom. Like,
sure.
I know that's easy to say after the fact when we saw how that game went, but I was baffled at that decision before the game. Like, I cannot believe that they did that to him with no practice with the starters. When you have a guy in Larry Borom who's started like 25 games in his career at both tackle spots, I just think that was a disservice to Karan. And it's okay if he's not ready. Like you said, Michael, he's a 3rd-round pick out of Yale. What he didn't have a training camp. Like, what do you expect? It's going to take a little time for this guy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just mismanagement. It's the reason why the Bears are 4-11, right? Like, it just at this point, for how great, I think, Ryan Poles has said a lot of, pretty baffling things at this point. The taking the NFC North and never giving it back. What are they, like 2-14 now or something like that?
2-14 against NFC North teams under Ryan Poles.
It's either that comment or like saying that this is that comment saying that this team is going to be hard to make during training camp, or saying that this offensive line is very depth heavy and very good. I mean, those are just baffling comments to look back at now, through 16 games in the year.
The deepest offensive line that Ryan Poles has had. They had a guy named Chris Glazer active yesterday. I mean, like, and no offense to him, like I'm sure he's a nice guy, but
sure.
we literally didn't know anything about him, like at all.
Even reporting that was a problem, right? Like, no one knew who this guy was, like, before the game.
They sent out inactives, and I was doing the math, and you and I were talking about it. It's like, I'm only counting 7 offensive linemen here, and then we got word through the grapevine that they had activated a guy last minute, and so it's I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, it's just all bad, and it kind of, I don't know. You're just kind of the reason why you're 4-11 right now. Is just there's inefficiencies in everything that is going on with this team right now, and it'll be interesting to see in a couple weeks what this reckoning means. Is it a complete reckoning where Kevin Warren's like, the foundation is bad, this is all bad? Is it just like you trust Ryan Poles and you're like, you're doing it this way? It's very interesting in a couple weeks when we like go to this end of year Bears press conference to see what are the vibes and what is the direction of this team right now? Because you've been looking for this franchise quarterback for so long, but it feels like literally everything else around him is not good.
Is crumbling down.
Yeah.
This is going to be our only show this week. So thank you guys for joining us. Once again, hit the thumbs up if you're with us here on YouTube. Leave us a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. We do want to address this Seahawks game, although, Michael, you pointed it out earlier. Like, I don't know what there is to say at this point. We're heading into a Thursday night game against Seattle at Soldier Field, day after Christmas. The Seahawks need a win. I mean, they're in the playoff hunt. They can still win the NFC West, but they cannot afford to lose this game. And so you got a Bears team going nowhere against the Seahawks team that really needs a win. What do you think? What do you feel when you look across at the Seahawks, Michael?
Well, I feel bad for the country that they have to watch this game on Thursday Night Football. I mean, it's just another national audience for this Bears team after playing Monday Night Football the last couple of weeks. I just think at this point, I've said Caleb, and I think we've said the continued growth of him. But I think I'm going to shift mine to just a fight. Like you have like pride to play for at this point, right? Like you got 2 weeks left, or 2 games left, I should say. And you're playing against teams that are playing for stuff, right? Like you're playing against the Seahawks who are playing for their playoff lives, and you're playing against the Packers. And we'll see what the situation is. Maybe that game ends up being where the Packers don't gain anything from winning, so they might not play their starters. We'll see how that goes. But
that would be crazy if that's how the Bears end this Packers losing streak.
Yeah, that would be.
Not that I'd be super confident in the Bears to beat the Packers backups right now, but
yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't either. But the Seahawks team, obviously, they lost a heartbreaker to Minnesota last night. A tough interception for Geno Smith at the end of the game. But I just want to see that fight. I just want to see any sort of a pulse. We haven't seen that from them over the past 3 weeks, and it's kind of disheartening just to kind of see that if you're a player, right? Like you're just kind of like, you're not trying to lose, but I feel like they're a bunch of just a bunch of things where you're just kind of like, man, like this could have been a stop. This like penalty is like an unforced error.
Mhm.
This fumble doesn't need to happen. Like you just want to see some sort of fight because I feel like we said this on Friday, like or Thursday, whenever we talked last. These guys, and it's like Keenan Allen said, these guys are playing for a contract. These guys are playing for their future here. And there's going to be a lot of tape of like them getting burned on a long play. There's going to be plenty of tape of like penalties that might hurt them moving forward.
I'll believe it when I see it. I don't see a heartbeat coming back at all. I mean, the vibe. I've been in a lot of losing locker rooms over the last 6 years. That was probably the worst. Like I said at the top, it cleared out faster than I've ever seen a locker room clear out. I don't see the vibe changing in a couple of days. I don't think they have any chance in this game personally. Most valuable Bear, Michael, I went with Keenan Allen for the third week in a row, and he got me a big victory. You had DJ Moore, Keenan, of course, with the big 141 yards, something like that, and a touchdown, 24.6 fantasy points in half PPR. DJ Moore got you 10.5. So I take a key one-game lead here, 8-7. Potentially the clinching week here for me in week 17 if I can get a victory in our best of 17 series, and I get to pick first. And I'm really not sure what to do now. Like we said last week, I'm not touching anybody on the defensive side. That's been a mess. I don't think you can accurately rely on anybody to get an interception or to get a sack or anything. I'm staying on the offensive end because that's where at least they're putting up some numbers. Now, my debate is, what do I do? I don't know. It feels a little unfair to pick Keenan Allen 4 times in a row. But
he's
also
playing for something.
Yeah, well, he is playing for something. That's true. I was leaning toward mixing it up, and I'm going to stick with my gut. I'm going to go with DJ Moore. Maybe that's a huge mistake. Maybe I'm going to regret this when Keenan Allen has a really big game. I'm going with DJ Moore as my most valuable Bear. I did consider Rome. I see Rick in the comments says he's going with Rome for a bounce back week. Michael, where are you at? What are you thinking?
I'm going with Caleb. I know Rick was upset with me for not taking him last week, and obviously I would have won. But I feel like I'm at a point right now where I win regardless of when I pick Caleb. So I'm just going to pick him for this Thursday because I think we're guaranteed. Well, obviously stuff can happen, but he'll play. I know that he'll play Thursday for the most part. I can't guarantee that he'll play in a couple weeks just based on what could potentially happen in that week, like the regular season finale Packers.
Yes, this is your third and final Caleb choice. I like your decision. I hesitate to think, the whole last week I was like, I don't know. I don't think they're going to play Caleb in week 18. But the thing that I've kept coming back to today is like, it's the Packers, and they got this terrible losing streak. Do you really think the McCaskies are going to let them sit Caleb against their chief rival? We've heard the stories all over the years of how much the McCaskies want to beat the Packers, especially if the Packers have nothing really to play for and they rest Jordan Love. Like, there's a golden opportunity to end that streak.
Right.
I don't know. On one hand, I get the arguments for sitting Caleb at some point down the stretch here, but I don't know. That's hard. I don't know if that would be a popular decision, but I don't know if that really matters in the locker room a whole lot anymore. I mean, this season is over. CJ's going with Cole Kmet, who did get a touchdown. We saw a Cole Kmet sighting yesterday. He's still around, still doing stuff.
Where's Gerald Everett? Is he still on the team?
Gerald Everett caught a pass yesterday. I had forgotten about him too. Yeah, he's
heard that at the beginning of the year where we were like, "Oh, 2 tight end sets, it's going to be so useful." And wow,
I think he probably wins the award for the guy we talked the most about, who wound up being the least important to this team. Is Gerald Everett.
Probably
did absolutely nothing this season.
Yeah,
was on the field a few times. Maybe has like 3 or 4 catches. I'd have to check. Yeah, that's a tough one. All right, Michael, who you picking in this game? What's your score?
Seahawks. I don't know. I don't know. This game is kind of fluky to me because obviously it's short rest. It's on Thursday. The Seahawks have to come in, I know they don't have to fly into the East Coast, but they still have to fly into Chicago.
Yeah.
It's Christmas, obviously, on Wednesday and Christmas Eve on Tuesday, so that plays a factor. It's just a fluky week. So,
It is. Weird things could happen.
yeah, so I think the Seahawks win. I'll do 16-14. I think it's a close game. I think just based on I think if this game was on Sunday, I think the Seahawks win by a good chunk of, points. But because of the flukiness of this week and the quick turnaround, I think it's a closer game.
Okay, that's interesting. I like where your head's at. It is a weird week. It's hard to play on Thursday, and you're right. They're traveling from a long way away. I just don't see any fight in this Bears team anymore. I'm taking the Seahawks. Literally, I'm picking my score off the top of my head here as I think about this. I don't know. I could see it being something like 27-16 or something. There might be some ugliness to this game. The weather's supposed to be fine, but yeah, I think the Seahawks win by a couple of scores.
It's just I don't know what to expect because I think I don't know if we'll go back on our predictions this year, but I don't think you and I have really been too accurate about like what the expectations are. Not even just like picking the team, but just like what could potentially happen, which isn't a great review of our podcast. I guess I shouldn't say that out loud, but like
it's not a great review of our prediction abilities,
right? But like it is just interesting where it just says like how unpredictable this team has been this year, right? Where it's just like they found so many unique different ways to lose, and this is just where we're at this point.
Well, that's the season in a nutshell. Is the expectations were through the roof, and the reality, it has not met that. And we were picking the Bears a lot early on in the season, and they had a lot of winnable games, and they started 4-2. It's crazy to think about. They haven't won since that game in London. It's been a pretty wild ride. We got two more games to go before this season is mercifully over. For all Bears fans out there. Thanks for joining us live, everybody. One more time, hit the thumbs up if you're with us here live on YouTube. Leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, and head to shawlocal.com. The number one best way to support us is to subscribe at shawlocal.com. We got a bunch of stories up there from yesterday's game. If you want to read Michael's stuff from the Lions locker room, head over there. I got some stuff from the Bears locker room. Like I said, this is going to be our only show this week. We will come get back with you guys next week to preview that Packers game. He's Michael Dwojak. You can find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I'm Sean Hammond. I'm at Sean_Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.